Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Beatrice Weber is truly a first. She is paving the way for the women who come behind her. She took a path that no woman in her ancestral Jewish lineage had ever taken. Beatrice left her dowry behind. Beatrice was an ultra-Orthodox Jewish mother of 10 who chose to believe in herself over her husband. By choosing herself, she decided to be on her own, manage her own finances, and fight for custody of her children. As Beatrice said in her Medium post, choosing myself over the financial support of my parents was one of the most life-affirming choices I have made. It allowed me to spread my wings, explore my new experiences, and connect with my true inner strength. Listen to Beatrice tell her story of leaving a religion that controlled her life and how she chose freedom for herself and her young children. Ladies and gentlemen, Beatrice Weber. Today, I'm speaking to Beatrice Weber. Beatrice has a very interesting first, as actually several very interesting firsts today, and I'll let her tell you all about it. Welcome, Beatrice.
Hi, Sandi. So good to be here and talk to you.
You're welcome. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know some stuff about you that I want everybody else to know about you, so give me some background.
Yeah, so you're right. There are a lot of firsts, and we can go in so many different directions. But one of the firsts for me was going to college. I was the first in my family. My parents, none of my people that came before me ever went to college. So that was a big first for me. And I only went as an adult. I didn't go. It wasn't given that I would go. I went back to
And
college.
why is that? Why is that no one in your family went before you?
So in the community I come from, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, college is not really encouraged. Though nowadays there are some programs where they kind of have separate classes for people from the community, but in general, it's not encouraged. The encouragement is, that you get married at 18 and start having a family. So, for my parents, it wasn't even an option. Like it was, I remember, that's funny because it's coming to mind that I come from, they're very intelligent people, both sides of my family. And I remember the teacher coming to my grandfather. This is a story I was told, coming to my grandfather and telling him that your son, right, my uncle, is so smart, like he has to go to college. This was like at 13 when they finished their secular studies, the boys. And it was like the family story, but like there was no consideration of him going to college. It was like absolutely not a question. So I went to college as an adult, which was considered a little more acceptable because I kind of had most of my children already, but
Mhm.
still was definitely a first and was definitely breakthrough for me in terms of my future, but also in terms of I think changing history for myself and my children as well.
Yeah, for me, that's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around in a sense because I was taught like college is not an option. It's not, going to college. I have to. I should say it's the only option, right? So for us, college was like high school, really. And whether or not my family had money, that's just your next step
Yeah.
to financial freedom. And for me as a woman, that was really important. So to hear that college is not even thought about is very new to me because I don't come from that background. And so why did you want to go to college?
So I had most of my children already, though I had two more after I started college. And, I was feeling a sense of angst. I never even graduated high school because I was sent to a religious seminary for my last 2 years of high school. So though I got a pretty good education until then, I never finished high school. My marriage was kind of a little tumultuous at that point. I wasn't sure where things would go. And I really wanted to do something for myself. And like the dream of going to college and getting an education
Yes.
just felt like such a right next step for me.
And did your husband support that?
Because our marriage was so rocky at that point and there were people that got involved and then who wanted our marriage to stay intact, he was kind of very much a push, like encouraged to allow me to do it for the sake of the marriage. Was that like kind of I'd go to college and then the marriage would be okay. Ultimately, I ended up leaving the marriage. So he didn't support me, but he didn't stand in my way.
Right.
Which was a big deal because I have a friend who was also, a first, who came from an even more insular community, and her husband didn't talk to her for all the years that she was in college.
Oh my
goodness! So, at least I didn't have that. We kind of didn't talk about it much. He didn't support me, but he didn't stand against me. And that was that. I did my thing.
And what did the kids think? When you were going to college, what did your children think?
At the beginning, they were really excited about it. They came to my graduation. I got the psychology degree, so it was exciting, right? Because I got this award on stage, and kind of, I have pictures of my, cap and gown and all of that. Later on, when I went to get my MBA and I actually did that online and was working full time. That was a lot. That was a lot for them, and in retrospect for me as well. So that got very challenging. But I think the idea of me going to college was definitely something appealed to them. And out of 3 of my adult children, 2 of them went to college. One of them graduating with a degree in pharmacy, which I am super proud of.
Yes.
Yeah.
So did anyone else in the community feel excited about your going to college? Did other women particularly, how did they feel? What was the reaction for other women?
It was very mixed reactions. Typically women, if they would go to college, it would be for some very specific degrees. They go for like the occupational speech therapy was somehow considered more acceptable. The social work was also considered acceptable. I didn't end up doing that, but my goal initially was a degree in psychology and then research, a PhD. And that was something I think that blew people's mind. They had no idea what I was doing, as long as it was something. And I had a sister actually that ultimately got a speech therapy degree, and that was considered acceptable because those were kind of jobs that you can get and still work around your family schedule. So those and there were special colleges that were set up, or sections of colleges that were set up for these women. So that was considered more acceptable. What I wanted to do was a little different. And, at one point I was doing internship at Columbia in the research labs. And I remember I had the badge and I was coming home picking my son up from school and a woman saw it and she's like, "What's that?" This was like, they couldn't understand where I was going and what I was doing. So I think there was some openness to the idea of at some point, a woman wanting to do something, but for me, it was going to be a really next step in my life. And that was a little hard for people to understand.
Right. So for the next steps in your life, what became of that? So after you went to college, what did you do?
So I ultimately ended up leaving my marriage. Again, as I mentioned before, the idea was I would go to college, kind of get a job, get fulfillment at home, and then things would be fine. But as I became more and more independent, it became clear to me that the marriage was not going to work. So I ended up leaving, and that was a very, very big deal. Though I do have an uncle that got divorced. It was different because, I left. I left for my independence. I left for my freedom. Even though, I had to leave, end up leaving in the middle of the night, with my kids, which was kind of like escaping almost. Ultimately, I left because I felt that I deserved better. which is really unheard of in the community. That's unheard of.
That's unheard of for me, that you wouldn't feel you deserve better.
Yeah, so again, there was a strong sense of obligation in the community. I think part of it is just because a lot of the religious rules in the ultra-Orthodox community
There-
also, yeah, I left because I felt I deserved better. And that was a first. The women in the community are very much raised to a sense of obligation and responsibility, yes, at the expense of your own happiness.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. That it's your responsibility is to others, not to self.
Correct. Correct. And part of that, I think, is because of the very strong religious rules and morals. And I think there's another layer. I'm a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, as most of my peers, all four of my grandparents. It was
Mhm.
very rare to have grandparents that were not Holocaust survivors, in the
Wow.
community. And that put a strong sense of obligation in terms of rebuilding the community, having all those children. You're not living for yourself, you're living for the people that died, who were very close to me. And my grandparents were all adults, during the Holocaust, all lost most of their siblings, parents, were displaced, had to move to foreign countries, all of that. So I think that also played a strong role in the sense of, there's a strong purpose to fulfill. It's not about being connected to yourself.
This is where my thinking probably is I need help with, because my impression is, if I'm here to fulfill a purpose, being a better me would help guide me towards that purpose, right? So if I know my family died in, whether it's Holocaust or slavery, I would think that they would want me to be even better as a person, so that I can be the best me to help the community. But that sounds like that's a very selfish thought in that community.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you now. And that's a lot of the work I do now, personally for myself and supporting other people as well. And we'll get to some other first soon in regards to that. But I absolutely agree with that. But that was not the mindset at all. The mindset was the community comes before the individual, and all efforts need to be made to support the community. Again, now understanding, I believe it's very trauma based. It comes from
Yes.
a place of fear. It's not necessarily coming from a place of compassion or from a place of wholeness. Absolutely. It took me years to reach that point.
Wow.
But now I absolutely agree with that the only way we can step into the role of helping others, of supporting others, is if we're really connected with our true self and standing in our own power, not giving up our power to others.
Yeah. It's similar to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help someone else.
So it's interesting because as a mother in the community, there was definitely some emphasis on self-care. Like it was very common to have a lot of cleaning help and support in the house. The way I see it, the idea was, because you're having another baby next year,
Yeah.
right? You need to have the strength to have the other
Right.
child. There was a lot of care after you have a baby. Like it's very common for the first 6 weeks not to do anything when you have a newborn baby. For the first 2-3 weeks that you send your children out, that you get meals sent to your house for a month. It's very
Wow.
common, right? You're really taken care of.
I
Again,
like that.
you're not having right, but you're not having 1 or 2 kids, right? I have 10 children. I'm one of 8. My children's father is one of
You
9.
have 10 children?
Yes, I have 10 children. Yes.
Amazing. I find that so amazing.
Yes. And
And you look great.
thank you. It is amazing, but it was no big deal where I came from. It was no big deal. It was considered pretty standard, pretty standard. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was okay with it. I didn't think anything of it. People ask me, "Oh, did you feel forced?" I'm like, that's what I was doing. That's all I was doing. I love to have babies. I love to take care of my kids. I didn't think of anything else.
But were there women, Beatrice, that just didn't want that many kids, or felt it was a pressure on their bodies?
We didn't really think much in that way. there was a process if you felt like it was too much. So if you felt like it was too much and you really couldn't handle it, you had to go to a rabbi, get a dispensation, and then you would kind of get permission to go on birth control and take a break.
So the rabbi has to give you permission.
Correct. That was the process. And not that I'm sure there are people who don't go through this process, but the way like we did things, I
Yeah.
had to go through that process. Yeah.
And your husband had to agree to that as well.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was, again, it was considered a strong
The norm. Yeah,
have
that's the norm.
children. The norm, and if somebody couldn't have children or didn't have children, within the first year or two, there was a lot of fear around that. Like, what if they couldn't have children? Like, what
Oh,
if something, it was terrible, and they were people who didn't have children were just looked upon with such pity. It was a lot of pity.
because that could be just a bodily function, right? That you can have kids.
Yes. And there are organizations set up in the community to help support people, to give them access to medical treatments and support them emotionally and financially. There's a lot of money that goes into supporting people because, again, it's such a high value having.
And what do the husbands think when they marry someone and they can? I mean, sometimes it could be the men too, right?
Absolutely. I just will never forget how excited I got pregnant like a month after I got married. I was still 18, and I'll just never forget how happy my husband was. He was just like, we lived in this little basement. I remember him like jumping, almost like reaching the ceiling, because it was, again, we were 18. I was 18, he was 20, we were kids, but there was always this.
The pressure.
Yeah. And a lot of it wasn't overt, it was just like the way things were.
Yeah, yeah. Because I was just thinking, it doesn't always have to be the woman.
Oh, no.
It could be the man.
Yeah.
And so would they divorce you? Would you get a divorce if you can't have kids?
Technically, there's something in the Talmud that if you don't have a baby for 10 years, your husband could divorce you. I don't know, because that was so not my experience. I just had one baby after she was premature, so she was born 8.5 months after I got married. I had another one 11 months later. So I had no experience with infertility. So I don't know what goes on, but I do know about these organizations that, put a lot of money and effort into helping people. And there's a lot of advances in the fertility or the infertility field. So, and they very much go for it in terms of helping each other out.
That is all so fascinating to me. I could do a whole thing with you.
You can do a lot of whole things with me, for sure.
So it wasn't celebrated that you wanted to go to college. What about when you decided to leave? I mean,
so that was interesting.
Or get a divorce.
Yeah, it was interesting when I left. So when I left, I definitely had some people in the community supporting me, helping me. Really, people were wonderful, helping me after, once I left. When I left, I kept it very quiet because, again, as I mentioned, I was leaving secretly. I was scared. I was scared to leave. I was mostly scared that I wouldn't be able to have the children with me. I knew that I could leave, but there was a threat, by their father that I wouldn't be able to leave with the children, and that was terrifying to me. My children were everything to me.
Yeah.
So when I actually left, I didn't tell anybody. But after I left, there were people who knew that things were rough, so they didn't encourage me to leave. But once I left, they were there for me. So I had quite a few friends that were really supportive. I didn't have where to live when I first left, so I stayed first by one friend, then by another friend for 2 weeks until I found an apartment. So people were really kind to me.
Were you working, Beatrice? Were you working?
At that point, I was working. I started going to college in 2007. I started working in 2008, and this was 2014. I was director of operations at this, local nonprofit. So I had a job, which was super important because I couldn't have left without it.
That is, yeah.
Even though, it was my finances were pretty complicated because my parents had built the house that we lived in, and we got rent from those apartments. But my then husband refused to leave. So I ended up
You
leaving.
left.
Yeah, I ended up leaving. But my family very strongly opposed me leaving. And so that meant all my relatives, the vast majority of my relatives, were not supportive at all. And that was
What
very.
was their rationale for you? If you expressed to them that, you're unhappy in this partnership, what is their rationale for having you stay?
So happiness was not a factor. I don't know, like there's an arranged marriage, right? So it's not like you choose a person, your parents choose the person.
Oh,
Ostensibly, you get to have the final okay in the matter, but essentially, if everything checks off okay and you don't have an absolute aversion to the person, you're encouraged to get married. So there isn't the marriage starts off with the idea that you'll get married, you'll grow up together, and you'll be okay.
there's no love fest. It's not I'm in love with this person. This is just, I've seen similar in
Yes, correct.
in
It's very
Indian
similar.
societies. And I remember my friend, we were 16 and I helped her run away
Wow.
because she grew up here and her family wanted her to marry someone in India because this was pledged, I guess, at birth. And she's like, I imagine growing up in an American society, going to public school, like all your friends, and then one day you're told, "Oh, it's time, Beatrice."
Yeah. Well, we were told. Like I knew. I remember I was 12 and I baked a dish for Friday night.
12.
I didn't get engaged at 12, but I baked something. I cooked something.
Okay.
I cooked a dish, and I remember bringing it to the table. And my father, for a compliment, was like, "I'm going to tell the matchmaker what a good job you did." Even we would learn the Bible, right? Like the Old Testament in the Hebrew. We spent a lot of time on that in our Judaic study classes every morning. And the one incident when Rebecca marries Isaac, there's something in the language, but from a young age, we'd be taught they first got married and then they loved each other. There's no love before marriage.
Oh my goodness.
So even at that young age, I was probably 8 or 9, those ideas were already being inculcated into us, so that by the time we reached that age, that was just normal. We didn't think I didn't think there was another way. This was the way to do it.
Right. So what were some of the negative sides of leaving and, of being the first in your community?
Yeah, so there was a lot of pushback from my family, and then eventually from rabbis in the community that I actually trusted and had a good relationship with, and had a long-standing relationship with. So I was very shocked. I was very shocked to experience that. I in retrospect, I realized what a threat I was. Imagine if every woman
exactly
would do what I did, because from the outside, we looked like a very successful family in the community. My then husband was a very highly respected scholar. My parents had built us this big, beautiful house. I kept this nice home with these 10 children. So there was like kind of this aura of this respectability.
Well, let me say that. Let me ask this question then. Was he financially successful? Because you said your parents built you.
No, his role was not to be financially successful. His role was to be a scholar. Okay, and he took that role very seriously, which ended up frustrating me at certain points when finances were tight. But he got married to me with a dowry. Okay, my parents gave a dowry, and with a very clear understanding that he will be a scholar his whole life, and he very much did not think it was his responsibility to bring no money. There were times that he would get a stipend for his studies, and that would be the income, but that was where it ended. It was clear that from him and from my parents and anybody else that was not his responsibility at all. Yeah.
So,
So,
so the parent, your family felt, okay, we're supporting him. Everything's going fine. Why are you
yes.
dissatisfied?
It was interesting because you brought up your Indian friend. So the community does not have an official caste system, but there is an unofficial system that especially impacts your marriage partners. It impacts other things as well in terms of where you get accepted to which religious school, but it impacts your marriage partners. So before I left, we were kind of really high up there. We were getting suggested, like matchmakers would call up with suggestions of rabbis' daughters. I had a son
Mhm.
that was 20, rabbis' daughters, things like that. And once there's a divorce in the family, you kind of pummel down,
Down.
down.
I get
That
it.
was my parents were like, you can't do this. How are you going to marry off your kids? How are you going to marry them off if you leave? That was their big fear. And in the back of my mind, I was like, you married me off. I'm not very happy. Are we going to
You
continue?
didn't do a great job with that one.
Yeah. Are we going to continue this pattern? Of not doing what's good for us, but continuing to do what's good for others, and then ending up in unhappy places. Like, how does this make sense? But that, from their perspective, they had invested a lot into this marriage, into this whole picture.
Yes.
Me leaving just broke that all apart, and it was really hard for them to separate and to see me, as a human being with her own needs and desires. But I had reached that point in my healing where I was connected enough with that I was able to say, I'm going to leave no matter what. And that was why I think I knew in the back of my mind I needed to have that job. I needed to know I had that paycheck, even though my parents were very wealthy. And again, as I mentioned, had always financially supported us. Somehow I knew that once I'm going to leave,
they will stop.
Things will be different.
Yes.
So that was a lot of the pushback and the betrayal from the rabbis who, I first started off in family court, got, temporary order of custody, orders of protection so that I can keep the kids with me, all of that stuff.
Right.
But then I was strong. I raised money for that, which that was a first for me. I don't know how I came up with that money, but I did. A lot of it borrowed.
GoFundMe. You should have done a GoFundMe. You would have gotten so much money.
I got the money together and, went to court. And after 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, the money goes like this in family court. It's kind of this secret. I feel like people don't know what goes on in family court. It's crazy. So at that point, my parents and even my lawyer was okay with it. Really much were pushing me to go to rabbis to work this out. And I had friends telling me, don't do it, and don't do it. And I was like, what do you mean? Everybody knows me. I was very, very much in the community at that point, very, very religious and observant. And I was like, what do you mean? The rabbis know me. They know I'm a good parent. There's no problem doing this. I don't have any risk. Ultimately, it was, on the one hand, I would say one of the most awful experiences of my life. On the other hand, really jump-started me to another phase of my healing, and my growth. But it was a year and a half of
nightmare.
A nightmare. I mean, the things that took place in that space were ridiculous. Well, since then, it was comprised of 3 rabbis. One of the rabbis is in jail for koshering a nursing home upstate and set it on fire. So there went him. The other one was kicked out of the rabbinical court and doesn't really have anything to do. So I guess, karma. I don't know.
Exactly. No, there weren't good people to listen to anyway.
I don't know. But what ended up happening was, after over a year being there, I had to go back to family court, and it was tough and it was rough, and I was shocked by the betrayal. They sent me to psychiatrists, and it was awful beyond belief.
Wow.
So I went back to family court, and and eventually got the divorce and custody of my 4 younger children.
Just the 4 younger ones.
Yeah, I had left with the 4 younger ones.
Okay.
At the time I left, the older ones were very upset at me. They were very upset at me for even thinking of leaving, for even thinking of that. Their father very much was talking to them a lot and really helping them understand how bad my decision was.
Right, right.
So the four younger ones, were agreeable to come with me when I left in the middle of the night. So I kept, I had stayed with custody of them. Yeah, and
Did you
that's
see the older ones? Did they come to visit you like the older ones, or what was the relationship?
it was very strained, and I'm very hopeful that it will get better. But unfortunately, because of other firsts in my life, where I started speaking up about issues in the community, where I no longer identify necessarily as a member of the community, that has really, they're very upset about it. They're very, very upset about it. So I'm very hopeful things will change, but as of now, unfortunately, my relationship with my older children is very limited.
And so what is the family standing in the community now?
So I don't really know much because I don't deal, like, no one's calling me up for matches for my kids. Like,
Right,
that's
right.
not happening, right? So, but I have a 25-year-old son, a 21-year-old daughter, and 20-year-old son. I mean, that's considered old, in the community. That's considered very old. So I don't really know,
Maybe they'll marry for love, Beatrice.
one of my daughters married, and I don't know if I want this public. So
Okay, okay.
I heard through the grapevine that she actually met him. The one that I have one daughter that's going for her pharmacy. She's almost graduated her pharmacy degree. That she actually met him somewhere, and then she had somebody introduce them so that it should look.
Nice move.
Yeah,
Nice move, I
yeah,
would say.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so what are some of the joys though that you're having now, that you're through this phase, and what are some of the joyful things that you
There's a certain level of freedom that I never imagined I would have that I have now. And some of those freedoms are just so simple, but being able to just make the choices that work for me, I'm somewhat limited in the choices I can make for my children, but still I have a lot more leeway than I used to have. It's really the ability to live in a way kind of connected to my inner self and my inner truth, rather than focusing on what others want, instead of trying to control all the outcomes, which was so much part of it, figuring out this, figuring out that. I just get to live in the moment and enjoy the moment and be here today. My spirituality has become very, very important to me, and I get to practice in a way that feels right for me. There's so much of the way I was raised was, the religion was a huge part of it, and so many rules, and women especially were bound by so many different rules, and I don't have them. I mean, this might sound funny for some of the people listening, but just being able to walk out the door with t-shirt and jeans for me is huge freedom.
Yes.
My hair, we spoke about my hair, right? I had to shave my head for 20 years. That's like, I love just having my hair, as crazy as my hair is.
Because it's yours, and it at least for African American women, like, our hair defines us,
Yeah.
right? It's a statement to say who you are by the way that you wear your. I don't know what it says about me with cutting it off every 2 weeks, but that's for most women that I know, regardless of culture. Hair is considered your crowning glory, right? It's the thing that people see you coming, and right away women go out to make sure their hair is done before big events, or because that's just a big thing. Even I was doing this unconscious bias talk, and hair was a big thing in corporate America for African American women. It's, how you wear your hair says a lot. And sometimes it could seem defiant if you wanted to wear it natural. It seemed defiant. And so I've never thought of my hair as my crowning glory. I just thought of it as a nuisance of growing and, making sure that I could easily maintain it. But I could see just having that freedom to grow your hair out is amazing.
And it's interesting because when I first started growing out, I did what you're supposed to do, right? And went to get it straightened, and it like I did, the whole the keratin straightening, right? Try to get it straight, and it just like would not. It lasted for like a couple of days.
It defies straightening.
And I was like, you know what? Forget it. My hair is going to do its thing. And now I'm wearing it up, but usually I wear it down and it's
Yeah.
big and it's big.
I like the big look.
Yeah, no, I like it too. I like it too. And it really has come to define me. And really, I actually wrote a piece about it on Medium. I've written some of my pieces there. And, that hair being cut off every month, right? I cut it every month.
Yeah.
Shaved with one of those
razors,
home shaver things.
Yeah.
Feels like it was very deeply connected to me not having a voice.
Yes.
It was.
Yes.
And I read there's
cutting away your voice. It's almost like cutting away your voice.
Yeah, there's some I think it's Native Americans that don't cut their hair because they believe their intuition and their power lays in their
hair. And the Samson effect.
Yeah, and right, exactly. In my piece, I wrote about Samson, exactly, because we were taught. It's very interesting because it doesn't seem to be that it's a very old custom to cut off your hair, but it has become very accepted.
Well, I was going to ask that. Is it just, I don't remember that being a biblical thing because my husband's a pastor. That's a man thing, a man-made custom.
Yeah.
That's not.
Yeah, that's not biblical at all. So there's some, I think, in the Talmud where a woman was, all her children got to be high priestesses because the walls of her house never saw her hair. So there are things like that. There's also some reference to a woman uncovering her hair so that the men should leave. So there's some reference to hair covering in the Bible as well.
I understand covering, but not the shaving.
No, the shaving, it seems to have been, it's a little murky when that actually started, but it wasn't more than 100 or a couple of 100 years ago, or not. And it's only certain subsects.
That's right.
Not everybody does. Not all. It's not something that exists in all Orthodoxy. But where it does exist, it's considered very important. But it's not everywhere. Absolutely not. There are many that would consider it wrong. But there are tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of women doing it.
But at what age? At what age do you start that? Because I see young girls. I lived in Crown Heights for
the Crown Heights community would not. I don't think they keep that custom, so they would not. They would never shave their hair. But
the women wear wigs, though.
Yes, the women wear wigs, but they wear their hair under their wigs. To cut it short, I think, or tie it in a pony, things like that. And that the hair covering or shaving or cutting your hair only happens after you get married. So it has to do.
Other men don't look at you. That's what that's about.
Yeah. Yeah, so
you look too gorgeous. Somebody else will.
Yeah, well, it gets a little interesting because the wigs that the women wear are sometimes so beautiful, a lot nicer than their natural hair, and some of them are really expensive and beautiful, and it's like, I don't know, but it's kind of evolved. It's really a custom that kind of evolved and took on different features in different communities and subsects, and everybody's doing their thing. Again, my experience was this, and it was interesting because both where my parents and my in-laws came from, that was not considered a requirement. They cut their hair short, like my mother always had her hair short, but never shaved. So it was particularly, in retrospect, particularly challenging. And also, I would even say bordering on abusive, because it was not something that...
It's a control mechanism.
Yeah, it wasn't something that was customary in our family system at all. There were people very close in subsects, very close to us that did it, but not our one. Yeah. So, there was a lot of control involved in that. And, that's what my life was like for many years. Submitting to others' control, and that's not happening
I,
anymore.
I feel like cheering that you got out of jail. Like you,
Kind of, yeah, kind of. It was a journey, and that's why I say that that year that I worked with the rabbis, that I had all that betrayal and heartbreak and heartache, ultimately, led me to explore my connection, to ultra orthodoxy and where I fit in and what I like about it and what I don't like about it, and that kind of set me on a path to find really my own connection to spirituality, my own connection to Judaism. I mentioned I don't know, I don't think I mentioned it. I became an interspiritual minister.
so
So
tell me about that. Tell
yeah,
me,
so
you're a woman minister, a female.
I'm a woman minister. So there's a lot of people don't know about this because generally ministers are associated with specific religions, or you said your husband is a pastor, specific sects within religion,
Yes,
right? Generally, but there is a field called interspirituality, and that kind of believes that there's all different ways to connect to the divine, to spirit, to God, and always are acceptable. And there are many people, and that is the subset that's growing, I think, the most in the United States, of people who are spiritual but not religiously affiliated, right?
right,
So that means
right.
they feel a strong connection to God, to spirituality, but not to a particular way of doing things. So this space provides that space to be able to practice, in a way that feels right, that's not necessarily connected. They do a lot of interfaith work as well, and provide, ceremonies, whether it's marriages or baby namings, under kind of this interspiritual umbrella. For me, more than attaining that kind of clergy
Right.
designation that I have right now, it was a way for me to process this very extreme religion, which parts of it resonated and I felt deeply and still feel deeply connected to, and parts of it didn't. So
Yeah.
it really allowed me kind of the space to explore that and learn about all the different religions, and interestingly enough, at the end of it all, I felt really connected to Judaism, and felt really Judaism felt like that nice combination. It has the combination of kind of the spiritual mind way of doing things, but it also has a lot of similar to indigenous religions, very practical,
Yes.
physical, right? If you
Yes.
live, like, soon's coming Sukkot, the huts, the holding on to the
Right.
vegetation, and every holiday has the very strong rituals, but there's also the kind of process of connecting on an intellectual level as well. And more recently, right now, I'm in a program for a Hebrew priestess ordination. So I'm really excited about that.
Invite your family.
I feel like it really it's very earth-based, divine feminine. So it really speaks to me and really kind of takes from the things I really like about the Judaism that I come from, but at the same time gives space for the feminine, a lot of space
Yes.
for the feminine, and also
Yes.
space to practice in a way that's healing and feels right. So I'm very grateful for this like winding journey, and I don't know where it'll take me next, that has allowed me all this exploration. I'm incredibly grateful for that.
And so tell me about the work that you're doing with other women.
Yeah, so right now I'm providing one-on-one coaching, and I'll be soon be providing a group space where I really help them identify their strengths, identify who they are, who they want to be in the world, how to navigate around people, and then finally how to create that legacy for themselves. So many women that I meet have lived so much of their life for other
Mhm.
people, and kind of finding this path is so important. One of the things that I found very interesting when I started sharing my story is that people resonated with it. And I thought my story is so wild. Like, who's going to resonate with it, right? This is like a wild story, right? I don't know if
I
any
can tell you a lot of people would resonate with, whether Orthodox or Jewish. And as a woman,
a woman. That's what
yes,
I found, that I, I was surprised how many women who were not from this community resonated with the idea of finding your voice, resonated with the idea of the importance of standing up for yourself. I also became like financial independence is very important to me, and I became a personal financial coach, and like
yeah,
recognizing how many women there are. They may even be professionals, but yet kind of feel like, oh, that's the man's job, or I'm not good at this, and how important it is to be empowered around that. So that's really what I do, and kind of speak about my story, but really hone in on what the women's needs are at that specific time, and help them really kind of develop their voice and figure out how to take the next steps to create the life they want.
I think telling your story resonates with a lot of people. I know I've read a couple of your blogs, and I really think this spans religion. It spans, it's a human thing, right? And there are a lot of women, let's stick to women. There are a lot of women who are in similar positions, just not knowing who they are. Maybe they got married to get out of the house and, they married the wrong person. And I've talked to friends who are like, I'm not happy in my marriage, but guess what? I can't leave because I'm not financially secure, or I didn't go to school, or what kind of job would I get? I'm now living a good life, right? Good meaning there's someone else making the money, you live in a nice house, you drive a nice car, and all the material possessions are going to go away if you leave. So you rather stay and take the abuse, which I don't understand, than to let the outside world know. And so there's fear and there's pride and there are all these different emotions connected to this. And that's why when I read one of them, I think it was this week, and I was like, wow, this is just a woman's story.
Yeah, it really is. The details are different. We all have different details, right? Because we all come from different circumstances. But I agree with you. The message and the idea of stepping into your power, of finding your voice is just so universal. It's everybody's story.
And I'm particularly passionate about women because I was I still am a woman business owner. But when I had a larger business and I dealt with corporations, and when I worked in corporations, women were just treated very differently. Covertly, it wasn't something that was wide out, but it's known. And you go into a job knowing as a woman you'll be treated differently. And as an African-American woman, that's a double whammy. And I used to joke about it, but it wasn't really a joke. I was a short African-American woman who wore glasses. So it all piled up. And you're treated differently in all of those scenarios. And you learn to find your voice. And if you speak up, there's a negative reaction to that as well.
Yes.
You get labeled as troublemaker, loud. There's nothing good. There's nothing good about speaking up and finding your voice. And so you have to be a little bit brave to do that, and a little bit not caring about what other people say about you when you speak up. And I had that. I know people who says, oh, here comes Sandi, the troublemaker.
Yeah. It's awful. And they never say that about a guy, right?
Never
say that about a guy. Yeah. That's a whole other conversation. And it's interesting because, I come from such a, sexist and misogynistic is the only word I can use to describe it. So you think you come to the bigger world, right? And it's all equal. And oh my gosh.
Different flavor, same issue.
Yeah.
So I really wish you luck with your work. But did anyone inspire you? Did you ever see anyone and said, I want to do what they're doing, that put you on this path? Whether in your culture or
I wouldn't say that I had one person. Now I have a list of my few heroes that I look up to, but back then I didn't know who they were. So, but I had like little signposts along the way, I would say. I had a friend that had a cousin, the first cousin that had gone to college. So she was kind of my inspiration. Oh, maybe, she can do it. Maybe I can do it too. Later on, I when I was looking into going into a spiritual school, I realized that I knew one person who had graduated with this. So I called her up. I'm like, oh, maybe this is my next step. So every little while I get these little kind of indications. And now I have my list of people that inspire me and who I aspire to be. Elizabeth Gilbert, Maya Angelou. These are people that I are my kind of guiding lights as I continue my path.
So now that you've built up quite a repertoire of firsts, Beatrice, has it made you bolder? Are you braver to try new things now, or do you still have like butterflies?
That's a good question, and it's funny because I just mentioned Elizabeth Gilbert's name, and she describes a fear. I love how she describes it. She claims fear never goes away. And the only people who are fearless are psychopaths and people. Like we all have fear. And she's like, fear gets a seat on the table. Like fear gets to be here, but it doesn't get to make the decision.
That is a nice way of putting it. There's certain things I'm not afraid of. I'm not sure I'm on the psychopath track, but there's certain things because I know I've done it before and it didn't kill me. Then I like to try new things.
I absolutely, I agree with you. I remember the first time I put one of my pieces of writing, one of my personal writing up in public, I could not sleep that night, and now I just write it and whatever. I have like 50 people going on my Medium page every day. I have no idea who they are. And I don't spend more than a second thinking about it.
Well, give us your Medium. Tell us what your Medium.
So my name on Medium, I believe I'm trying to, I'll get you all the URLs so you can have all of that.
Yeah.
So I've written quite a few essays there. I've had some of my essays published, which is exciting. And of course, there's always, once you do something a couple of times, it always gets easier. Yeah, my name is Beatrice Weber. I'll send you the URL so you can see it there. And I agree with you. Things do get easier. The more you do them, the more you get easier. But I think every time you start something new or something different, I think what helps me is knowing that I've already done something new and different and I'm still here.
Yes, you survived.
But still, now I'm going to be working with somebody and I'm working towards putting a book proposal together, right?
Nice.
So that's I'm working with somebody on kind of putting together a couple of keynotes that I can promote myself to start speaking. Those are big steps. And I'm like,
And then a movie. You should have a movie, Beatrice.
I should, right? I don't know if any of you saw my unorthodox life. I'm just getting through it. It's very different than my life, but similar enough that she came from, type of background. So it's inspiring. Yeah.
I think your book, is it the book, will it be about your journey?
Yeah, it'll be a memoir.
Yeah. Well, we can turn into a screenplay. I'm quite.
Yeah, that's easy. That's easy. The options are all there.
I'm all with you for that. So I think, do you have anything else you'd like to share about?
I think we covered it all. We all get to make choices. We all get to create the first in our lives. And I'm glad to share some
That's of that. The message. That's a big message I think we can take away from this, is that we all have a need to share our voice. Some people will stifle it. Some people will take that leap of faith and just walk out on faith and for the better. And you know what? There'll always be obstacles that you have to climb over, and you have to choose. When you get to that fork in the road, right? You have to choose which way to go, and it has to be true to you. And I love that you are true to yourself. So thank you, Beatrice.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
So awesome speaking to you. Yeah.
I'm sure I'll think of another topic that I'll grab you to speak on, especially women. I do a lot of women topics, so we can talk about
Wonderful.
that.
Wonderful.
Great to have you.
Yeah. Great to talk. Yeah.
This is Dr. Sandi. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on the first, where no two stories are alike, even if the circumstances are similar. Let this discussion serve as inspiration for others to show what's possible, and more importantly, to produce seconds and thirds.